The clock spins backward, the hourglass cracks, dust of tomorrow on yesterday's tracks. Footprints fading, erased by the breeze. Time's a thief with no apologies. Loop the clock, let it shatter, let it take. Round and round the hands play their trick. Past and future, a chaotic blend. Starts the finish, where does it end? Neon shadows on a sundial's face. Echoes collide in this time warp space. A comet's tear, a planet's laugh. Moments breaking like a photograph. Jump the line, rewind the reel. Do you remember, or did you just feel? Loop the clock, let it shatter, let it tick. Round and round the hands play their trick. Past and future, a chaotic blend. Starts the finish, where does it end? The pendulum swings, a wrecking ball. Each second builds, then it lets it fall. Time's a circle, a cruel mirage. It's a masterpiece, it's a sabotage. Loop the clock, let it shatter, let it tick. Round and round the hands play their trick. Past and future, a chaotic blend. Starts the finish, where does it end? Where does it end?
In the thousands of books and videos on the Great Pyramid that you can see on YouTube and other venues, in libraries, no one has ever revealed that the entire structure is patterned in hundreds of rectilinear links, all involving measurements of the number 138 and its multiples, like 276, 414, 552, 690. Those are all divisible by 138.
This room is huge. It's 1,836 inches long. So many mysteries about the Great Pyramid. It's not even meant for us to decipher or even determine right now. But one thing we know is that it is arranged architecturally as a three-dimensional holographic template of the future in inches. Every inch is a year of world history.
It was called the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil. It was called the Pillar, like the Pillars of Hercules, like the ones at Gibraltar. It was something that held up the sky. I have my very first published book. I spent about 9 chapters explaining all the iconography and imagery that relates to the Great Pyramid that have been found in the Book of the Dead, the oldest rabbinical and Hebrew text. And the idea associated to the Great Pyramid from the very beginning is that it was an altar and it was a pillar. It served both functions. A pillar supports something that is very important, but an altar is built in recognition of something bad had happened, and there must be something good as a result. An altar it's not worship. It's not worship. Altars were built in ancient times as apologies, like I'm sorry. It had a totally different concept back in ancient times. When altars, like brazen altars, were set up and people gave sacrifices to him, it was in recognition of, hey man, I haven't been living the way I have. I'm sorry, God. Please accept this. I don't have much, but I don't have any money, but here's half my bread. And they would throw it in a brazen altar in front of the church, and that person would walk away feeling that, hey man, I gave my apology to God. Well, the Great Pyramid, being so strongly attached to the idea of an altar, begs the question, who is sorry and who are they addressing?
I'm not going to waste time in my coming videos when I show you the calendrical significance of the Great Pyramid's layout. I'm not going to show you that. I'm not going to waste time with all these specifics about the Great Pyramid that I have already mentioned in all my videos. I have a whole series about the Great Pyramid. If you have not listened to it already, then you're probably not going to value these next 2 or 3 videos about the actual calendar of world history that is encoded within the rectilinear dimensions of the Great Pyramid, scientifically documented and measured by Sir Flinders Petrie. Although Sir Flinders Petrie had no idea that his measurements were going to be used to show that every single linear inch that he measured actually represented a year in world history. Many people have theorized this. No one's been able to show it. Their calendars have been corrupted. Their chronologies were incomplete. They didn't do it. Everyone before me has relied somewhat on Usher's chronology, which is absolute bullshit. Now, this monster, or kraken, has been depicted as a gigantic squid, and this carryover involving tentacles and human sacrifice produced Medusa, a once beautiful goddess turned hideous. Further, these are memories of the ancient Bronze Age ceremony of human sacrifice when a large squid was set on top of the face of a paralyzed victim, a Medusa. So, this the rise of Kronos being the youngest of the Titans, it was a golden age, because Hesiod divides the history of the world into 5 ages. We're in the 5th age now, which is not dissimilar from the Aztec stone of the 5th sun, which is not even Aztec, it's Toltec, but I'm just giving you what the academics call it. But the Toltec stone of the 5th sun, or also called the Aztec calendar stone, it also itemizes 5 ages. So Hesiod, he says that during the golden age of Kronos, men did not have to work and toil for the ground. Food was aplenty, it was all over the place. Men lived in absolute peace, and they even interacted with the gods. We're living within such a sophisticated, advanced construct that 90% of what we think of reality could just be just very thin facets of programming that are always aimed at us, so we'll perceive them as real. Yeah, it's the energy required to maintain this type of deception isn't even as much as you think. Yeah, it's I believe this is far more sophisticated than we can presently. I mean, we're already approaching it with virtual reality technology. We're already approaching it in theory. So, we're humans. We're some really, really ingenuitive creatures. So anything that we can imagine as real, it doesn't take us long to bridge the gap between what is imagined and what is experienced. This is also the background to the Tower of Babel story. Remember, the key point of the conversation that the gods are having between each other over mankind is that there is nothing that we cannot do, that we cannot imagine. If you ever go to the Great Pyramid, you'll see there's no way that men chiseled that stuff. 2.5 million blocks. The average core blocks that make up the 203 levels of masonry are 2.5 tons. I offer these chrono markers for perspective because I have repeatedly put out data from myriads of sources, and most of them from books antedating World War II. And I've provided those titles free to the public on my Podia page. Anyone can download for free not only my bibliography of 1,300 works, but also the 400 books that largely educated me in my life. Free downloads. They're in the links below. Egypt started at the same time as almost every other known civilization started, after a terrible cataclysm that destroyed the old world, which we know very little about, aside from the technolithic precision artifacts that were left behind. like at Pumapunka, or some of the unusual quarries in Archaix that show that someone was using some very, very sophisticated sound vibration fracking to basically slow off entire areas of rock using high frequencies. The Great Pyramid of Egypt is entirely technolithic, and nothing else in Egypt is except the Osirion. Do not confuse technolithic with Heliolithic. They are two different types of building. Technolithic is antediluvian, it is pre-flood, it is during the contact period when humans had contact with someone else, perhaps human, but they were far more advanced. Some people call them Anunna, Anunnaki. But when they fled in 2647 BC, when they left, wherever they went, underground facilities, under the ocean facilities, whatever they went, they left behind a lot of their technology, thinking it was obsolete anyway because everything on the surface is going to be destroyed. But it wasn't all destroyed. The Great Flood was not an end to humanity. There was a lot of survivors. And those survivors went on to build whole new nations and cultures, but they remembered the event.
So anyway, very few people very few people have an appreciation for the size and the dimensions of the Great Pyramid, which is absolutely relevant to the study. If you stand in front of the Great Pyramid, you have to look left to right just to see the whole side. It's 756 feet wide on all four sides. The sloping angle to the apex, where there is no capstone, is 203 levels of rock called courses. This means its tolerances were so high they were machined. They weren't done by hand. They weren't done by the standard Egyptological BS description, copper saws and all that crap. Don't believe that. Now, here's something you need to know about Mount Pele, about this volcanic destruction, and St. Vincent, Santa Maria, all this volcanic activity. There was no volcanic activity in 1901. None. In 1902, not only do we have volcanic activity on a Phoenix year, but here's what you need to know. It's 2024 right now. And nowhere in the world since 1902 have we experienced anything like the death tolls and massive destruction that happened in 1902 caused by volcanoes. Natural disasters happen all the time, and the death tolls are high. But when it comes to volcanism, this incident in 1902 is still at the top of the scientific records. It's still there. The volcanic destruction and death toll is still on record as the worst in the Western Hemisphere history of all time. And there have been no volcano anywhere in the world since 1902 have volcanoes taken so many lives. Not even a fraction. Those of us who are ready and the system is wanting to kick us out because we have awakened, we make our exodus. Those who have not awakened, they're going to be in two groups. Some of them are going to be on the surface, and they're going to be the future Magdalenians and Denovicians, or however you say it. Two different branches of Cro-Magnon. I have provided you dates. I have never deviated. I have never changed a single date. Chronicon was written over 12 years ago. I don't need to change the date because I know I got it right. I know I got it right because I cite all my source materials. And now I am going to show you in the Great Pyramid that whoever built the pyramid had mapped the future, because there's absolutely no way that what I'm going to show you could be real, that these architectural features of the Great Pyramid were done way before these events ever occurred, and yet they're there. They're easily seen for anybody to measure, for anybody. Many times, these natural disasters are covering something else up. So let's look into that. You tell me when this becomes when I get to the point of sounding like a lunatic. You tell me in the comments section when this list finally is agreeable to you that something unusual happened in 1902. Because what I'm about to read to you doesn't make sense.
All these things should have been distributed over a long period of time in the development of our modern world, but they weren't. They all appeared within a year of each other. These are all things that we use and utilize and rely on today in 2024. The manipulation is ancient and quite revealing. It demonstrates that something wants to keep humans miseducated, ignorant, and primitive, often introducing accusations against a second group, Group B, something that seeks to be mankind's benefactor, but has been severely demonized throughout history. But the answer lies in the Vedic text. The Vedic text described it was 1,200 years, and that 1,200 years was 430,200 days. The math is perfect because the ancient draconian year was 360 days. 360 turnings is 360 shars, just like the book of Genesis describes. And the evening and the morning was the first day, and the evening and the morning was the seventh day. Zechariah Sitchin knew his shars were turnings. He even alludes to it in his own writings, to the doubt that he had many times over that his own chronologies were in error. But he pushed forth anyway. It was basically a challenge to the academic community to start looking at the Sumerian records from a whole new perspective. But the problem is if you're going to if you want people to peer review your material and take you seriously, you need to be more honest about how you translate your words and how you fit your narratives into a chronological scheme. But here it is, 1902, and something that was destroyed by the Great Flood is suddenly discovered. 1902, in the month of May, 1902, archaeologists first noticed a metal wheel in a lump of pressed debris that later came to be known as the Antikythera computer. It was discovered in 1901 by sponge divers off of Crete, off a little island called Antikythera. Now, no one knew what it was. It was just part of the shipwreck. But in 1902, somebody actually set it aside and started looking at it, and they realized it had gears in it. Came under scrutiny. The highly complex device had been excavated from wreckage under the Mediterranean, a 300-ton ship on its way to Rome, loaded with the plunder from the Third Mithridatic War. Told you guys a lot about the Poison King, King Mithridates IV, who took on Rome, and the great mysterious rock that fell from the sky that stopped him from beating the Romans' asses. Remember that? So this ship had been sunk around 60 to 70 BC. It was publicly announced in 1902 that the Antikythera device was indeed a sophisticated geared computer older than 2,000 years, used to chart astronomical orbital periods of the moon, sun, and planets, both forward and backward in time. This is important. Remember, this computer device that was over 2,000 years old is designed to compute periods of time, both backward and forward in time. And this was discovered in 1902. I can't hammer that in more because you're about to see some more stuff that's perfectly relative to the backward and forward in time phenomenon. I'm so confident in what happened and the dating that I mentioned a lot of the data in 3 published books. That's another thing I want to address to you guys. I got a lot of new people to my channel that don't know. I'm only new to YouTube. 4 years on YouTube. I'm not new to publishing. I'm not new to research. I've had over a dozen books published, up to 17 at one time. I retract some of them when I want to rewrite them and put out better material. I'm kind of neurotic about that. But I've written 27 books, and they're all available in PDFs or on Amazon or Booktree Press publishes 7 of them. I was a writer, author, and researcher taken very seriously way before I started putting all my research for free public consumption on YouTube, because I believe it's that important. And in this research, this is what you find, guys. You're gonna find all the data that shows that through all these resets, our infrastructure has remained intact, but not on the surface. On the surface, we get reset. In the underworld, we have the preservation of libraries. The reason it's phenomenal is because thousands of libraries have been destroyed. Thousands of book burnings, purges. Christians blame the Muslims, and Muslims blame the Byzantines, the Eastern Orthodox Christians. And the Romans blame the Carthaginians, and the Carthaginians blame the Romans. Phoenicians had vast libraries. They blame the Italians and the Greeks for stealing their copies. Library of Pergamum, it was sold to Carthage. Romans ended up getting that. They burned a bunch of those. Christian book burnings went on for over 1,000 years, and that was absolutely necessary. It was necessary because when the Christian chronographers like Justin and Augustine rewrote all the histories for Constantine and added in all these pseudo-histories that didn't even exist concerning Jesus, and they added in all these miracles and all these apostle deals that never were in the original text, they had to rewrite all these other books in order to lend it credence. The second and far more popular ideology of post-flood Sumer was the belief in the return of the mysterious and arcane divinities that descended from the heavens long ago and dwelt among their ancestors. This is the message of the book of Revelation. Now, because of the second faith captured the minds of the people, those holding to more monotheistic traditions departed Sumer early on. They kept to the elder ways passed down from the patriarchs, separating themselves from the masses who had invested their hopes and all their efforts on the return of those celestial beings. Their belief of a future and holy Savior was replaced with a religion that involved a pantheistic kingdom that would descend from the stars to rule among men as terrestrial gods that could be visually seen and consulted. In this way, they eliminated the need for any distant and unseen God, a creator. One thing that we do not have right now, until recently, is a working knowledge of the chronology of when this cataclysm is going to take place. If you think that the elite do not have think tanks and the NSA, CIA, and all these alphabet groups don't have their feelers out for all maverick researchers and scholars who come up with all this deal, and they don't fact check their material to see which theories hold water and which ones don't, you're sorely mistaken. A lot of our taxpayer money goes into secret black budget programs where people like me, Jason Brashears, are being researched quietly by government operatives who are documenting all my data, and they're fact checking it. And with the Archaix research, they're probably very well attuned to what I have been publishing since the year 2003. They don't want people to prepare. They want all kinds of chaos. This is all about control, guys. It's always been about control. This is the history of the Anunna. When you really research the traditions about Deucalion, sea crops, Ogaiges, Enki, you realize these were benefactors only in the sense that they brought a technologically advanced infrastructure full of its amenities, food, and water back to a world that had lost everything. And the only place they could have brought it from was the underworld. And remember, Phoenix doesn't just bring all these, aerial phenomena, the sky fallout, volcanoes with earthquakes and stuff like that. Phoenix brings changes to our world, little holographic edits. And I've been very specific about this through many of my presentations. Many times, these natural disasters are covering something else up. So let's look into that. You tell me when this becomes when I get to the point of sounding like a lunatic. You tell me in the comments section when this list finally is agreeable to you that something unusual happened in 1902. Because what I'm about to read to you doesn't make sense. All these things should have been distributed over a long period of time in the development of our modern world, but they weren't. They all appeared within a year of each other. So let's do it. These are all things that we use and utilize and rely on today in 2024. Okay, now We're going to start with government. U.S. government, the Great Seal of the United States of America, is very quietly changed from the Phoenix, which it was. The Great Seal was originally the Phoenix. Benjamin Franklin said it was the Phoenix. Many books claim it was the Phoenix, and it was adopted in 1782. In 1902, they changed the Phoenix into a bald eagle, a carry-on bird. In 1902, the Great Seal of the United States was changed. On the other side of the Great Seal is the Great Pyramid, and it too is connected intrinsically to the year 1902, as we will see. 1902, the U.S. government suddenly starts the Census Bureau. A whole century of the 1800s, and you didn't think about creating a Census Bureau? Now, all of a sudden, the population of the United States is important to you. U.S. creates a Census Bureau to establish and measure and keep records on the population of the United States. 1902, in England, Queen Victoria dies. Her long reign recognized as the height of the British international power. Her death symbolizes the decline of England. At the same time, the United States is on the rise. Remember, the Phoenix is always descriptive of the change of guard, of the mandate of heaven changing, governments. But this 1135 BC Phoenix event that I mentioned earlier with Pharaoh Sekhnakti and the Olmeca and the Chinese, this is what started the 350-year dark age in the Mediterranean. Humanity went dark after 1135 BC. So, and in the biblical narrative, it's also dark. As a matter of fact, a lot of biblical scholars believe that Hebrew writers invented the ages of the judges because they needed to fill a historical void, and that didn't actually happen. These stories were borrowed, like Samson and holding the two pillars and all that. Same thing Hercules did. They believe a lot of these stories were borrowed from older Canaanite and older sources, like Ugaritic and Tales from Rashamra.
There are thousands of sites around the world where people are just, they're bewildered by what's found. It looks like somebody was practicing on how to do things with rock and stone and upside down staircases and cutting laser precision niches. It's like the people didn't really understand how to use the technology that had been left to them. But that's post-technological period. That's a subject for some other videos. Now, 2357 BC, during this 408-year period right here, when they've abandoned, when the ancients were carving giant effigies and using rocks to make patterns that could only be seen in the sky, because they were trying to induce the Anunna to return. They were trying to employ methods of sympathetic magic to get these people to come back. That's what the Nazca lines are about. That's what the CERN giant is about. That's what a bunch of these sky-facing effigies were about. And this is the period that they were created. Now, in 2357 BC, we have the first year of the Emperor Yao of the Chinese tradition. That's right here in the smack dab middle of the Sumerian king list, 7 Anunnaki kings who were ruling over a Sumerian civilization. Then we have 2313 BC. Mayan backed in 144,000 days are complete. It is right here where this cursor is moving, right before the flood. We don't know what happened on that date. We just know there was a lot of chaos in the world at the time. But we do know that the 7th king of the Nephilim dynasty, he ascended the throne at Shuruppak in 2291 BC, right here in this area where the cursor, right before the flood.
The oldest and longest enduring traditions agree upon a very intriguing fact. In the beginning, or before the deluge cataclysm, the gods were already divided into 2 groups. The Vedic, Aryan, Hurrian, Amorite, Nordic, Germanic, Persian, and Greek, all branches of the Caucasian race, maintained traditions of 2 groups of gods in antiquity that were in direct opposition to each other, and the source of that contention was mankind. 2 groups of Anunna, a civil war. both sides Caucasians, both groups guilty of DNA manipulations and the creating of designer Homo sapiens sapiens. Designer DNA programs carried out to create separate Homo sapien races. We're going to show definitive proof that every date in the old Near Eastern texts were not 35,000 years, 432, 241,200 days, years. It wasn't. They were days. They were turnings. Because in ancient times, they did not care about the sun or the moon. What they cared about was how many times the stars turned around the eye of the dragon. Once we recalibrate our thinking that all these ancient dates were in days, you're going to understand everything about the dating of Atlantis, what the Egyptians meant by 35,400 days. A certain pharaoh did this and all that. It all makes perfect sense, and it abbreviates the human timeline to a 5,500 year period when we first received civilization from somewhere else.
That'll work. So in our 1902 video, well, actually I've done 5 1902 videos, and I don't want to waste any time recapping any of that material. To better understand what happened, I have had to absorb more data from people sending me emails and screenshots and showing me PDFs, just blowing my mind how 1902 was a Phoenix year, but it seems to be there was a tremendous amount of preparation going on behind the scenes, all from about 1890 to 19. It's a 12-year period. Right. And it just really blows my mind that all this was happening. And if we were to look at 1902 holographically, and what I mean is, you have to understand my position about what calendars truly are. Like, the BC AD calendar was created in retrospect, but the actual dates of the BC and the events, they're holographically reflected with other calendars for the exact same years. So when we take the 241,200 shars of the Sumerian king list and reduce it to the Sumerian year, which was also the Brahmanic, the Vedic, the Mayan, the Quiche, and the Olmec year, which was 360 days, we just have 670 years. This same 670 years of the reign of the 7 kings is the same 670 years that Nostradamus mentions. He specifically mentions 670-year period and mentions at the end of that period that the Phoenix will rule. And this is what we have. 2239 BC, Phoenix destroyed everything. We know this in the historical record as the Great Flood. However, in the matriarchal records, we have it as the collapse of the vapor canopy. This is, in all the Nordic records, the same event that they declare when the sky fell. This is all the exact same thing. This is, in the ancient American traditions, the same event as the birth of the water sun, because the 4 sun ages began only after the vapor canopy was gone.
In 1135 BC, Pharaoh Seknakti of Egypt's reign ends as he reports a circling star that spit fire at the very end of his reign. The next ruler is Ramesses III, who records a terrible tsunami and destruction. Historians estimate that 3.8 million people died in this year from catastrophe as the kingship changed in Egypt. At the very end of his reign, Seknakti reported that an immense black cloud covered the sky. The sun turned blood red and disappeared. Red dust blanketed the land. Even establishment archaeologists have been perplexed as to why mathematics, astronomy, and calendar systems only appear thousands of years after the last ice age. The answer is a simple one. In 4309 BC, the Phoenix weapon shattered every faith the people had in the heavens and its stability, inducing a global freezing and series of disasters, critically depopulating our world. With Earth's axis pointing at Sol, it slowly rolled around the sun for 270 years, with one hemisphere frozen and dark while the other was bathed in continual sunlight, day and night being filled with the brightness of the sun. Calendars became obsolete and the Cro-Magnon civilization collapsed as Neanderthal again multiplied against them, hunting them for food. In 2309 BC, Wilkinson, Mysteries of Ancient South America, wrote concerning this year, "It is disturbing coincidence that ancient myths stress that the catastrophes, the coming flood of thousands of years ago, were preceded by gigantic wars, and that men wandered forth warning of the wrath to come, of which these wars were but premonitions." 792 years after this devastating worldwide restart, in the year 3895 BC, in the month of May, caused by Phoenix, something unusual happened. The year was 3103 BC. 3103 BC is well known to be the start of the Vedic Kali Yuga calendar. Some ancient calendars had different New Year's months, January, March, November, but this begin date could actually be 3102. The myriads of gene combinations are why life can exist in virtually every biospheric condition. Human DNA is extraterrestrial, interplanetary, and quite likely intergalactic. The earlier Earth-born races of Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon were long ago distinguished from the Moon-born races of dark humans, linked culturally by their veneration of goddesses, matriarchal peoples before the Great Deluge Cataclysm in the month of May 2239 BC. Negroid, Mongoloid, Amerindic, and Dark Caucasoid, the four great brother races of remembered antiquity who existed on Earth before the white Caucasian race and their own patriarchal sun cultures, the bearded white children of the sun called Shimsu-Hor in ancient Egypt.
They only ruled for 646 years in the Chinese version, but in the Sumerian version, they ruled for 241,200 turnings. Now, that's not years. Those are, you got to understand, the original calendar under the vapor canopy was a stellar calendar, and it was a matriarchal society. Turnings is how many times the stars turned around Alpha Draconis, the eye of the dragon, the ancient pole star before 2239 BC, altered the pole star to Ursa Minor. Now, the pole star here was the eye of the dragon, Alpha Draconis. All the stars every day surrounded one single turning of the deal was evening to morning. This is recorded in Genesis. The only timekeeping system back here was important was days. 241,200 days under the draconian calendar of 360 days a year was a very simple 670 years exactly, which comports to the Chinese Dragon King chronology, which is at the exact same time in history.
Sitchin concludes that the Egyptians affirmed from the very beginning that their gods had come to Egypt from elsewhere. Interestingly, the Ta Neter was a narrow strait at the southern end of the Red Sea, through which ships had arrived, bearing the newly arrived gods of Egypt, the horned gods, men like Vikings. The evidence that our ancestors knew of the approach of a civilization-ending cataclysm and made efforts to prepare for it are found everywhere in the annals of antiquity. It would be foolish of us to ignore these traditions, warnings. Another incredible parallel is mentioned inadvertently by Burgoyne. Sitchin wrote that the Anunnaki came to Earth in need of gold to prolong their existence. Burgoyne wrote that the evil inhabitants of the dark satellite benefit by their wicked activities against humanity, which provides them, quote, a means of prolonging their external existence upon the Earth, unquote. For many of the former residents of the dark satellite have, quote, descended to Earth already, unquote. This was the famous Antikythera device found in 1901 by sponge divers from the wreckage of a sunken ship from about 60 BC. Valerio realized the differential gears were a part of a device mechanism, but he was ridiculed, silenced, and ignored by the establishment. Eric de Sola Price determined that the device particularly indicated the year 586 BC and was used to calculate astronomical dates both forward and backward in time. After experimental periods were conducted, once DNA compatibility was maintained, the several different types of Anunna mated with the daughters of men, producing Homo sapiens sapiens who physically appeared in the likeness of their Anunna fathers. In the beginning of this interbreeding campaign, there was a great diversity which produced Caucasian groups, all being bearded. These groups were very tall, blonde, blue, hazel, gray, green-eyed. Average height, blonde, blue, hazel, gray, and green-eyed. very tall, with red hair, blue, hazel, gray, or green-eyed, and average height, which was red-haired, blue, hazel, gray, or green-eyed. 4 different types, all varying in different body types, but basically of the same parentage. Caucasians today with brown and black hair or eyes is simply due to the same intermarriages, migrations, and conquests that resulted with the non-Caucasians today having blue, hazel, gray, and green eyes, and lighter, fairer features, and even facial hair. In the days before the Great Flood Cataclysm in the 23rd century BC, a human's physical coloring and features marked him like a brand. Designer DNA allowing Anunna overlords to know what product belonged to them or to another. Ownership of worker humans could not be argued when physical traits separated Homo sapiens from other Homo sapiens with totally different characteristics because they were owned by someone else. Arabic traditions, as recorded in the Quran, which actually include elder histories antedating Islam, retell this dateless story. In the beginning, Allah created the jinn from spiritual fire, a smokeless fire before mankind. They were originally created to worship Allah, and there existed in those times nations of jinn. The jinn were ruled by Iblis, who led a rebellion against Allah and was later banished from heaven to earth for an allotted time period and destined to end in hell. Later, the jinn were guilty, added to their judgment the act of seducing mankind and provoking humans to worship them.
The overlap between BC and AD is a fiction. The year zero type, you don't have to go by any of that because the Annus Mundi calendar is unbroken. And if you're going to do calculations forward and backward in time, you would use the Annus Mundi system. The Annus Mundi system is well documented. I have several videos about it. It's an unbroken timeline. To give you an example, in our calendar today, the year is 2022. But in the Annus Mundi system, which goes all the way back to 3895 BC is year 1, which was also year 1 of the Phoenix timeline. It was also year 1 of the pre-flood world in Genesis, and it was year 1 of the vapor canopy. But 3895 BC, as being year 1, every single year can be calculated through, no matter what calendar system you're looking at, AC, BC, Olmec, Vedic, the Quiche calendar, doesn't matter, Bulgarian calendar, Ethiopic, it doesn't matter. All of those calendars began in that time period, and you can calculate forward and backward in time on the unbroken mathematics of the Annus Mundi calendar. And this year, in the Annus Mundi reckoning, is 5916. That's what this year is, 2022. So there was no BC AD conjunct back when we look at history books now and you see a year 0.
In the story of the Anunnaki, we have the appearance on Earth of ghost white spacefaring humans from somewhere else who through a premeditated plan modified a small population out of the vast hordes of dark peoples on this planet and refined them to the point where they could easily procreate with them with no complications. These visitors bestow information and technology to their new genetic counterparts and then disappeared again in most part, though there is evidence that a faction of the Anunna remained on Earth to eventually marry into, build family dynasties, and die among their Earthborn kin.
The original personalities were called Anunna. The Anunna themselves had much deification attached to them as well. But that's all it was, attachments. The further we go back in time, the more sophisticated we find the belief systems. They're not primitive. It's not like Jesus going around performing miracles and all this stuff that was added by the church to gain the appreciation of the pagan populations around them. So the original story of Jesus was absolutely devoid of the miraculous. But we've already covered these in prior videos. There are many books about that subject as well. When it comes to the Anunnaki, the belief systems prevalent today, flooding Facebook and YouTube and Reddit, everywhere, social media period, are of the Babylonian versions, the hyperinflated, fantastic deities, gods, Anunnaki. But that's all it is. 30 solid hours of presentations, 135 chronological charts, diagrams, illustrations, images, all related to the Anunna history and prophecies. And these videos, they're
They're backed up in this flash drive with 50 articles. Some of them are long articles packed with source materials, all on Anunna Anunnaki history, transcripts, posts, enough to fill a very large book. I've included the archaic syllabus of glossary words and definitions, as well as the year-by-year Archaix timeline of the ancient world from 5239 to 1 BC. Now, in ancient heaven, the demons sought to alter mankind, knowing his seed, his offspring, would one day defeat and replace the seed of heaven, the angelic sons of God that rebelled. Thus, the evil angels impregnated the daughters of men, seeking to pollute the genetics of the purely Adamic race on earth. God did not destroy Adam per se. He destroyed the earth, which is derived from the same Semitic root, Adamu. The first destruction of the world was due to the heavenly rebellion which earth and its civilizations, sentient beings beneath the authority of the angels not made in God's image, participated in. And second, he destroyed the earth with a great flood in 2239 BC, which was the year 1656 in Genesis. Because during the reign of the 7 kings, the earth had become tainted with hybrid blood. 52 seems to be the ancient American number for cycles of apocalypse. 52 and its variants, 13 and 26, they are found all over the Aztec calendar stone called the Stone of the Fifth Sun, which is an apocalypse countdown. Now, using scientific data obtained from a convention of archaeologists, astrophysicists, botanists, and historians who convened in 1997, Frank Joseph demonstrates in his research that in the year 3113 BC, a single or series of comet meteorite impacts devastated North America, causing global quakes, temperature and climate changes, drought, and blanketing of cosmic dust. His conclusion is that the cataclysm began the Mayan long count calendar. This aligns perfectly with our thesis, which demonstrates that a cataclysm will also end the Mayan long count. That the Anunna were not gods is demonstrated in that Zechariah Sitchin had found references to an Anunna belief in the identity of the creator of all, who influenced Enki, who we know as Enoch, to create humanity and again prompt him to warn humans of the coming flood. After the deluge, at seeing that pockets of humans survived the disaster, many Anunna concluded that it was the will of the creator of all that they should live. Although in the context of this video and other videos, I continually reference the Anunnaki as gods, you must understand I'm only referencing in that way because that's what they were regarded as. However, the evidence is very clear that a very strange pale race showed up among the dark races. These people had beards and they were regarded as gods, but they were human. There is no doubt in my mind that these were merely humans coming from somewhere else, either deep earth biospheres after a cataclysm or from an entirely different continent. Now, this great celestial body that the Anunnaki are attached to is not the Phoenix. There are no correlates between the Anunna and Anunnaki history and the Phoenix phenomenon. There are none. There is a celestial object that it does cause great destruction. At this date, the Near East literally explodes with cuneiform tablet inscriptions concerning the Anunnaki, gods that must be prayed to and sacrificed to in order to keep the heavens in order. This was the 32nd year of the reign of Nimrod, known in Sumerian records as King Amar-Udak, or in Akkadian as Merodach, and later Babylon as Marduk, vanquisher of Tiamat. He is the ancient Zeus, wielder of the thunderbolt. Interestingly, this was the 900th year Anno Pyramid, or the 900th year from the completion of the Great Pyramid, and it was 324 years after the flood, or 108 times 3. Recall that the pyramid was finished in the year 1080, which is 108 times 10, in 2815 BC. A further calendrical coincidence is that this was 1,188 years from the start of the Black Age, or the Kali Yuga of ancient India, which is an Anunnaki-related timeline. And 1,188 is 108 times 11, the number 11 being the sum identifying the Anunnaki according to the Babylonian Enigma Elish text. The number 108 was the most revered number in the ancient East. Even today, there are still 108 beads on Buddhist rosaries. After 60 years in the inner system, we arrive at 1855 BC. While there are no records for the specific year, it is interesting Nibiru exits the Sol system, completing its 792-year orbit. However, 6 years later, in the year 1849 BC, the Harappan, Sumerian, and Sodom and Gomorrah cities are all laid waste in what ancient records describe as technological weapons. This amazing and vast destruction is the subject of another video. These videos contain original research not borrowed from other videos. The history of our world is nothing like you've been taught. The Archaix channel will guide you through the dark. Reset theory is definitely thousands of years old. This is nothing new. It's only new to the general population now, as information is exploding across the internet, Facebook, Google, and YouTube demographics. On February 14th, Valentine's Day 1903, the blackest of darkness over Australia occurred, followed by a deluge of dust and mud upon 40 towns in New South Wales and Victoria. The material that fell in Australia fell about as enormously as that fell in the dusts of Europe. It was a tremendous blanketing of dust, dirt, and mud straight from the skies over Europe.
I call this in my own magnum opus, Chronicon. I call it cross-calendrical parallels, and I've documented hundreds of them. So concerning this same period of 1890s, let me share with you two profound ones that are very interesting to give people an idea of how calendars basically, they're holographic in nature, and the events are unfolding in the exact same years in different calendars. Listen to this. In 1898 to 1897 BC, we have a situation of a mighty king named Chedorlaomer. He's of Elam, which is present-day Pakistan. King Chedorlaomer, he invades Canaan, and he reaches as far as Egypt, and he subdues every single nation in between, including Babylon, Assyria, Akkad, the Rephaim, the Zuzums, the Zamzumums, the Anakim, the races of the giants. This campaign is mentioned in Genesis chapter 14. It's very unusual. It's the very first war mentioned in Scripture, and it's an all-out international conflict. So, but in 1898 AD, not BC, but in our calendar, in 1898 AD, we have a scholar named Pinches who introduces to the academic world the Chedorlaomer tablets that were found in cuneiform, ancient Near Eastern texts that tell the exact same story that we find in Genesis chapter 14. Tell me that's not unusual. The historical event happened in 1898 BC, and it can be shown chronographically by many different ways. And it also recorded in the chronology of the Book of Jasher.
To the 19th century critics and scholars, the forgery provided the prejudice that they needed to shun away any further research. Academia now pretty much regarded this as a false text. In the face of higher criticism, the real Book of Jasher was fated to live on in obscurity, suppressed by those who would have greatly benefited the world by studying it. Even chronologists long ago almost got the date right. Willis, in Comatographia in the year 1668, wrote, "In the year of our world, Annus Mundi, 2453. He was only 5 years off. According to certain authorities, a comet was seen in Syria, Babylonia, India, in the sign Joe in the form of a disc, at the very time when the Israelites were on their march from Egypt to the Promised Land. The exodus of the Israelites is placed by Calvinsius in the year of the world, 2453. That's pretty much dead reckoning for something that happened 4,000 years ago.
But while these astronomical phenomena, the appearance of a brand new comet, astronomers admitted they had never seen this orbital path. The declivity of this comet was so bizarre, it was entered into the astronomical records for 1902. They named it Comet Morehouse, and since then it's never been mentioned again, because comets are not supposed to move in the way it was moving. Phoenix comes out of the northern heavens, and it passes over the ecliptic and goes straight into the southern heavens. And the reason is because it's not on Sol's ecliptic. It's not on the same belt that all the planets move around on, all that light show that we see. because the simulacrum has to have evidence of another star, a dark star, a compressed or frozen star. These are all actual astronomical terms. I'm not making these up. Anybody can Google frozen stars, and you will find that astrophysicists have known about them for over a century.
So we can move through here. Censorship is real, guys. It's been going on for a very long period of time. Americans are just waking up to just how much of the historical record was deliberately placed there to get us to believe in things that do not exist and to hide things that actually did happen. Ian Wilson shows how at Cataclysms the great mother goddess was worshipped and the bull cult flourished. Depictions of the goddess show her giving birth while enthroned between two leopards. The goddess between two leopards motif was specifically a pre-Diluvian symbol known widely throughout excavated Near East sites that date to about 2600 BC to 2240, the date of the Cataclysm that ended the matriarchal dominance, not 5600 BC. But upon their return to the planet, they found the thriving Cro-Magnon civilization was in full bloom. They had broken the chains of slavery, driven Neanderthal to the caves of the earth, mastered nature, established societies, learned how to modify holospheric reality to conform to their will, and Cro-Magnon genius had discovered the greatest revelation of all, their immortality. That physical life was merely a temporary path to a personal, eternal existence. Homo Anunna found, to their dismay, that they had manufactured a sentient species having the potential to rival their own superiority, having the intellect and spiritual intuition to someday realize that they were actually confined in a holospheric prison and quite possibly how to collapse it. Throughout this work, these Anunna files, this 360-day year will be referred to as the Draconian calendar. An epithet affixed to this system because the antediluvian pole star was Alpha Draconis. It was not the present pole star we have now in Polaris. It could have easily been called Codex Apocalypticus, because that's basically what it is. If you have not seen the first part, the Archaix Prophecy, Doomsday Reset, May 2040, after this video you may want to watch it. It's 48 minutes disclosing a 5,000-year history of the world in 138-year increments that lead to May 2040 AD. Mother Shipton, the Sibylline Oracles, the Book of Revelation, and hundreds of other sources all reveal that this 138-year chronology is fixed. It defies astronomical periodicity. There is no way an astronomical body could explain this reoccurrence so mathematically perfect. It synthesizes world history into a calendrical system by which we can date many historical events forward and backward in time, so much better than we can from the establishment records. What Cro-Magnon suffered, the absolute catastrophic collapse of their civilization's entire infrastructure, is going to happen to us as well. Many books, posts, and Archaix YouTube videos show this to be dated at precisely May 15th, May 16th of the year 2040. Of further significance, as we know in the biblical passages, it says the last days are going to be as the days of Noah. Astronomers have discovered a disturbing phenomenon concerning Earth's orbit position and distance from the sun. There is a mathematical formula belonging to all the other planets in this solar system, exempting Pluto, which is probably a lost moon, that forms a precise mathematic pattern that Earth does not fit into. Each planet is about twice the distance from the surface of the sun than the preceding planet. On a scale of millions of kilometers, the distances of the planets from the sun are Mercury at 58, Venus 110, which is times 2 of Mercury, Earth 150, which is only 40 from Venus, Mars is 230, which is times 2 of Venus, Asteroid Belt is 440, which is times 2 of Mars, Jupiter is 780, which is times 2 of the Asteroid Belt, Saturn is 1430, which is times 2 of Jupiter, Uranus is 2880, which is times 2 of Saturn, Neptune, Pluto alternate their orbits. This data shows that Earth is an intruder world, fits snugly between the orbital belts of both Venus and Mars. Earth is tilted at 23.5 degrees obliquity, but Mercury and Venus are not because they are not gravitationally locked to the dark star or Nemesis ecliptic plane. Mathematically, Earth can be removed to make the pattern perfect. Our planet does not belong in this solar system. For this reason, Enki made public the cover story, but kept the true purpose of the project to himself. In this way, Enki pulled off the greatest deceit in world history. He became the deceiver, the trickster. What Enki did for the human race was for the benefit of all people, all races. He introduced a series of coding protocols that required the passage of millennia to infect and converge within the simulacrum's own coding algorithms undetected, layers of disguised protocols that would suddenly converge into an override program, causing the simulacrum's own defense measures to collapse itself. In this way, Enki was both the voice and architect of prophecy, able to foresee the last days because he coded it. Able, not the last days of mankind, but the end of the prison of the simulacrum itself. Cro-Magnon man is classified as Homo sapiens sapiens. It's the same as us. It is a theory that Cro-Magnon wiped out the Neanderthal. The Cro-Magnon are not descended from Neanderthal no more than Homo sapiens are direct descendants from Cro-Magnon. In the writing of the Egyptian historian Manetho, we find a reference to a very, very specific number of the demigods and kings of Egypt that ruled until Egypt collapsed. That number is 1,752 with a zero on it. All the Egyptians, they always added a zero. So it's actually 17,520. But as I've shown in all my other videos, all these dates line up perfectly if you just take that 1 0 off. The Greeks added that 0 every time. Now, this is too specific a number to ignore. Look at this chart. 3439 BC to 1687 BC, the time between all three of these floods is exactly 1,752 years. Any of you can Google it. The Egyptian historian Manetho specifically said that this was the period that the demigods and kings of Egypt ruled until Egypt collapsed. That's interesting, because in 1687 BC, the whole damn world collapsed. That was the third great flood. The charge given to Enoch by Adam concerned records of great importance. It would make little sense to go through heroic efforts to save mere books which could be easily protected from the elements by those surviving the deluge. This must have been a truly colossal collection of knowledge. Enki created primitive humans from primate Anunna DNA, and then manufactured an upgraded type of humans by adding more Anunnaki DNA. Enki then used Anunna females to birth the upgrades which produced civilized humans that could procreate on their own. These were first the Adamu, and of this stock were Oriental people, the black-headed people, a description used by the Sumerians to describe themselves over and over in their writings. The writings describing history before the Great Flood have the common theme that initially the entire world was populated by black-haired, black-eyed people of small stature and brown and red skin, smooth, no hair on their bodies and no beards. It was a world when Caucasians did not exist, at least in this world, in the same continents as those that recorded these histories in their traditions. Enoch was commanded to testify against the Watchers, those that sinned with the daughters of men, for they had commenced to mix with the daughters of the earth, so that they were defiled, and Enoch testified against them all. The Babylonian historiographers and scribes were convinced that the 7 kings came from the heavens, and they were designated these beings as the children of Anu, who rebelled, which is understandable because the older Sumerian writings tell that the Anunnaki were the sons of Enlil, or Lord Wind. To advance this position is the fact that the Hebraic texts of Jubilees, the Genesis VI passage, and several extra-canonical works convey that the sons of God took or abducted forcibly the daughters of men, fathering a race of gigantic people. The Anunnaki, called Nephilim, or the Fallen Ones, in Scripture descended upon the earth and created a counterfeit theology involving many sons of God rather than just one, who was foretold in the elder prophecies to visit the earth to announce judgment on all. As found in the book of Enoch, sometime in his prophetic career, he had a vision of the Great Pyramid and its relation to the Tree of Life. He called it a mountain of fire at the middle of the earth, a description that we shall learn that was employed by the ancients when referring to the monument. Enoch describes its stones as brilliant and beautiful, splendid to behold. An angel tells Enoch, that mountain thou beholdest, the extent of whose head resembled the seat of the Lord, will be the seat on which shall sit the holy and great Lord of glory. Now we know this person is the chief cornerstone, the everlasting king, according to the book of Enoch, when he shall come and descend to visit the earth with goodness.
The Genesis chronology has the Great Flood happening in the 1656th year. The dating of the deluge in the year 1656 aligns perfectly with the Phoenix chronology in my book, When the Sun Darkens, published in 2009, which matches the Book of Jasher chronology, having the Great Flood also in the 1656th year. A Chinese tradition dates the flood at 2240, with a great object falling from the sky, according to Survivors of Atlantis, page 63, by the author and researcher Frank Joseph, who I highly admire.
The world full of civilizations, trade alliances, pyramids, cities, and a vapor canopy that allowed ambient radiation to cause flora and fauna to thrive. Mammalian life forms and humans often grew to astonishing sizes. The Persian king Cambyses, who in Egypt destroyed a tomb belonging to someone called Samandius, and found within it a circle of gold that measured out in 360 units. Every one of these marking out the days of the year. It's 360. Again, the year of 360 days in length originally was seen in monuments and ancient text, statuary, rituals. I've shown so much evidence of this. In the informative book Discovering Ancient Giants, written by William Henson, we find the Sumerians' histories in text after text. Whenever the starting point was recalled, it was always this: 432,000 years before the flood, the Dingir, the gods, then came down to earth from their own world. Now, Henson's statement is mostly true, save for the inflated 432,000 years. For the misinformation that has saturated the genre of books published on ancient astronaut theory, we have Zecharia Sitchin to thank. Sitchin's belief that Nibiru's orbit was 3,600 years derives from a mistake. That the deluge occurred in the 120th Shar induced Sitchin to multiply 3,600 years by 120 to produce 432,000, quote, years, unquote, from the arrival of the Anunnaki to the Great Flood, an error even Vedic chronographers made in determining the duration of the yugas, the world ages.
It goes all the way up and down the Grand Gallery. Study period. Any of the textbooks can show you the Grand Gallery, and you will see those niches. They are technolithic. They're not heliolithic. Technolithic means that they are absolutely so precise that the tolerances can't be replicated today. Our marble on bank buildings does not match the tolerances of the Great Pyramid. Yeah. Neither do we produce any masonry on this world today that we're fusing together 5-ton blocks with a mortar and adhesive that's only 1/50th of an inch thick.
We have already shown that the Great Flood of the biblical fame was in May of 2239 BC. Note, here are just a few references. The Vedic Puranas explain that the Kali Yuga age, the Dark Age, was a period of 1,200 years. This is in the Vedic Puranas. I didn't make this up. The same Vedic Puranas also say in a different passage that this was 432,000 years. But the original text must have said 432,000 turnings or units of time, because they are very specific earlier in the Puranic Vedas that this Kali Yuga age was 12 centuries. Well, 12 centuries and 432,000 days is exactly the same on the draconian 360 days a year count system. This is evidence they preserved actual history while remaining confused as to the chronology. This thesis completely shatters every theory of the Great Pyramid ever told, ever sold, or said. When you fully understand the implications of this video, you will agree. A series of numbers representing years and disasters appears in records from antiquity that defy ordinary explanation. They reappear in recorded historical texts over and over again. Then, in a third and most astonishing place, these same numbers appear all together in a synthesis so profound that their arrangement forms a holographic blueprint in multiple dimensions. All three are found in this item. This chronology is shown in our posts, articles, videos, and published books to isolate May 2040 as the next visitation of the Phoenix phenomenon, not an intruder world. Astronomer Royal for Scotland, Piazzi Smith, in the 1870s wrote that the descending passage in the Great Pyramid points to 3440 BC. He was 1 year off, pointed directly at Alpha Draconis, the Eye of the Dragon, or the ancient antediluvian pole star. The pyramid identifying the very 360-day stellar calendar it was constructed under. The fear of antediluvian people was that they were too small compared to the fair-featured figures they were referring to as gods, the Anunna, tall, bearded Caucasians. To primitive, uneducated people, these strangers were with pale features and white skin were angels. The Ethiopian Kebra Nagas text reveals that the children born to angels through the daughters of the Canaanites were so large that women were ripped open. You must remember, these ancient stories are from the perspective of people who have never seen Caucasians before, and they were very small, they had smooth skin, they were dark-skinned, dark-eyed, dark-featured, and they were very petite bodies, and to them, Caucasians appeared to be as giants.
Something's changed. So we have arrived to the Great Flood of antiquity. Just in this little small area, just tiny, I can't even separate it with the cursor because the area is so small. But just in this tiny little area, we have 2233 BC, which is the start of Babylon's astronomical records according to Callisthenes. We have 2200 BC as the Great Flood according to Roman Marcus Varro, a historian. And in the the Frisian Oralind manuscript, fascinating text, we have the date for the Great Flood at 2194 BC. It is also right here. Well, we can't separate it from this black line. That's how close it is. In 2179 BC is the flood date of the Toltec records. 2137 BC is the date the Chinese give for the cataclysm involving a sun darkening. 2100 BC is the start date for reliable Near East dating according to academia. What this means is all these different cultures and civilizations dated the Great Flood at this period of time. That they could get it narrowed down to this area is awesome. It's fantastic. That we have it so precise is for different chronological reasons. I have an entire video about the Great Flood showing 21 different ways to measure what year it happened. And it's 2239 BC. So it's profound that so many different cultures all dated this Great Flood at this period.
There are 203 levels of blocks on the Great Pyramid that start from the ground and ascend all the way up to an empty platform, which is the 204th block. The 204th level, I mean. 203 years on top of 1902. This countdown of 203 years leads to the year 2105 AD, which was the year as a great consummation according to the prophet Nostradamus, as seen in our prior videos. This is not my conclusion at all, but taken from a published book from a Nostradamus author. This cataclysm will cause an amazing discovery at the Great Pyramid or within it. The seer Edgar Cayce made a profound statement in the year 1932 when he was specifically asked about the Great Pyramid. Concerning this monument, he said, "It received all the records from the beginning of that given by the priests, to that period when there is to be a change in the earth's position." This is similar to the statement by Nostradamus concerning heavy visions of the future. I shall know different time. David Davidson was an English engineer who sought to prove Robert Menzies wrong, that the Great Pyramid was not a prophetic calendar of historical timeline in stone. He extensively studied and measured the monument and completely changed his mind. His own mammoth book, The Great Pyramid, Its Divine Message, with Egerton Sykes, ended up supporting Menzies, Smith, and Taylor, but added a wealth of new supporting evidence. 5600 BC is 2,800 years prior to the well-established construction date of the Great Pyramid of Giza, which by testimony of multitudes of ancient sources was built centuries before the flood of Noah, a construction date equally supported by carbon dating to the 29th century BC, not once, not twice, but 14 independent carbon dating studies. So we have a geometrical dating right here in the Anno Domini timeline as 2040. The Masons know well the geometrical dating of the Great Pyramid, what it contains, what it does, what it means. At least the upper echelons, the elites in the Masonic orders know this. What's not so well known is that all four slopes, each slope of the Great Pyramid is at 51 degrees. 4 of these slopes is 204. Times 10 is 2040. So we have a geometrical dating right here in the Anno Domini timeline as 2040. Those who would hold that this is entirely too arbitrary must take in consideration that the Anno Domini calendar is a retrospective calendar. It is not a calendar that had a beginning date at any definitive time in history, but was invented because of a story. 138 is profound. It is the principal message of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. The King's Chamber on the floor, the distance is 534 inches to the great step central axis of the pyramid. This is the central axis of the entire monument. This King's Chamber is 412 inches long, 204 inches wide, and 230 inches high. 534 plus 412 plus 204 plus 230 is 1,380, which is 138 times 10. Note, the King's Chamber, it had explosive pressure, which added an inch according to modern published research. But these dimensions are pre-explosion measurements. 534-inch horizontal length of the great step slab of the King's Chamber and the 846th vertical length of the Queen's Chamber floor to the pyramid baseline adds up to 1380, 138 times 10. So baffling and damaging is this sudden appearance that the scientific acudummies have over and over been caught manufacturing fake fossil hominid predecessors to Neanderthal. They even passed off on us pig bones. No anthropoids have long hair growing from the top of their heads, so how did humans acquire it? The anthropoids have thick body hair. Humans are basically hairless. Natural selection could never have phased out body hair while increasing the hair on the top of the head. Humans do have chimpanzee DNA, but the entire archaeological record of any evolutionary development between chimp ancestors and descended humans exists nowhere on Earth.
They imposed their new 532-year cycle that went back to BC 9 from 524 AD. This completely did away with the knowledge of the 552-year Phoenix cycle. And to add insult to injury, under the new Anno Domini calendar, the events of 522 were now entered into the historical record as having happened in 532 AD. 532 being their new Paschal cycle that replaced the 552-year Phoenix cycle. And they invented the lie that Exiguus created the Anno Domini calendar to calculate Easter.
An even more poignant pattern is found in 1841, when U.S. President Harrison is assassinated by poison. Though this history has been scrubbed, there is still researchers who claim this was murder, not pneumonia. This was 61 years before 1902, and 61 years after 1902, we have the evidence of an isometric projection that was indeed an assassination. This was 61 years after 1902, which was 1963, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. I tell you guys all the time, our world is not what you think. 1/3 of the entire human race died in the disaster. Unknown to the matriarchy peoples of Asia, Africa, Europe, across the vast oceans, the descendants of the Anunna had built a vast civilization. In a very different North America. The Anunna were this time prepared for the simulacrum resets. The establishment version of human racial evolution propagated today is extremely racist, proclaiming that modern humans descended from monkeys. The truth is occulted that Homo sapiens are the amalgamation of many parts, and yes, chimpanzee DNA is greatly a part of our genetic makeup. But the differences between human types is not from evolutionary development. It must also be noted that even a supergiant planet the size of Jupiter, if near Pluto, would still be invisible to the Earth. It's too far away. I'm often asked questions as to look, if Phoenix exists or if Nibiru exists, then how come we can't see it? I said, well, you can't see it for the same reason you can't see Uranus and Neptune either. People have to understand these objects are way too far away. Neptune is gigantic, and Uranus is even closer and of relatively the same size. But these gigantic worlds are invisible without telescopes. We can't see them today, and yet they're in our own solar system. And they're pretty close to Earth compared to the elongated orbits of both Phoenix and Nibiru or Nemesis. The goddess's name was Ishkunna, and she is faulted for the great flood. She further being remembered as being representative by a constellation that had fallen from the sky. Very interesting, because we find the exact same reference in the old Jewish Haggadah records of a constellation vanishing from the sky before the flood. The book Lost Scriptures of Giza is a work unlike any other on the origin and purpose of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Over 1,000 facts gleaned from hundreds of ancient and old source materials. This book concludes that the Great Pyramid is the original structure and all other pyramids were attempts to copy it. It was designed to survive a cataclysm, to preserve knowledge that only at an end-time generation would be able to perceive. It protects a secret important to saving humanity.
In 4039 BC, a dead world from the Nemesis system was caught in Earth's orbit centuries after Earth first appeared here. This was the capture of Luna and caused the capture flood. Hundreds of millions of people died. Civilizations collapsed. The Anunna were already thriving on Earth, many having survived the Nemesis destruction and freezing journey to Sol in their deep Earth biospheres. 600 years later, exactly the Nemesis X object passed through the system on its 792-year orbit, as disclosed in detail in my Anunna files.
Catalhoyuk sophistication is contemporary with the Harappan and Sumerian of the same period, 2600 through 2200 BC, the 4 centuries preceding the great cataclysm that we know of as the Great Flood. In 2006, scientists asserted that the magnetic North Pole has wandered some 500 miles since it was first measured in 1831. The wandering was minute initially, but in the last few decades, the polar wandering has increased to 25 miles a day. I don't know if Nibiru is a planet, or if it's an actual brown dwarf or a miniature black hole, but whatever it is, its gravitational influence is felt all over our world.